We are in the book of Isaiah in chapter 12. This is one of our great instances where whoever made the choices for the readings, they took basically the whole passage. Though, if I would stretch the borders of their goodness and graciousness, we could have stretched it even to 11:10. The reason is, if you have your Bibles open, in our passage we have one reoccurring phrase repeated twice. In that day, in 12:1 and in 12:4. So what happened is we have kind of like a song or hymn, or sometimes it's called canticle or psalm, whatever beautiful term you want to use, with two stanzas. So it's 1 through 3, and then from 4 to 6. But that phrase "in that day" first appears in 11:10. So theoretically we have 3 stanzas in one song. Okay, from 11:10 to the end of chapter 11 to verse 16, and then 2 short stanzas here. And before we'll go to the text, actually what I wanted to do is to tell you a little bit more about the structure, at least the structure of this passage. The book of Isaiah, because we talked about chapter 6 in like a couple months ago. So theoretically, you can, and I will, if you would want to rewatch that in YouTube, in description I will add the link, so you will not have to look for that. You'll just click the link and you will get into chapter 6. But it's kind of interesting. Book of Isaiah as a whole thing is might be lined out or structurized in 7 blocks. And they are relatively easy to identify. So the first block goes from chapters 1 to 12. And it's easy to identify where it stops because the next block starts with chapter 13. Is not really about Israel. It addresses Egypt. Okay? So then Babylon. But then you have like a whole block, the second block, where you have speeches against other nations. Okay? So, and with other nations, it's two chapters on Babylon. Then we have Moab, Philistia, Syria. We have Damascus, which is Syria. Then we have Cush, which is kind of present Ethiopia. From Egypt south. Then we go to Egypt itself, then the fallen Babylon, and we kind of stop there. And then we go back a little while into Jerusalem, and then we have a Tyre and Sidon. And basically the whole earth is under judgment. Okay? So basically from 13 roughly to 25, that's the second block. Then the next block is 26 to 35, and we know it, even if we would not really go through the structure of this passage, how it's linked. Actually, it is linked inside of the inner block, is very well structured too. But what is very unique for Isaiah is Isaiah from 1 to 66 is like a huge prophetic book. Okay? And prophecies or prophets in the Bible, let's stay with prophets, are not always, sometimes that's what they do, but not always. Sometimes, let's scratch it, all of that. Most of the time when we think about the prophets, we think of the guys who have like dreams and visions in the night. Something like a lightning bolt, strikes them, or, SoCal gas, has explosion, some kind of fire. The furnace blow up, and it's like, oh, and they have a prophetic vision of what will happen. Goodness knows where, nobody knows how. Okay, like 5,000 years from now. Okay, really, I mean, if we would really pay attention to the Bible, it's not really what's going on. What really, sometimes they give those kind of far away predicted prophecies, like we have them in Daniel, from 7 to the end of the chapter. He basically talks about the future, the restoration. Book of Ezekiel, from 40 to 48, with the restoration of the temple as a city, or city as a temple, and the land, and so on and so forth. That's kind of another one, another example. But most of the time, it's those guys who are so much into the word itself, so much into, in the sense of history, how word was applied in life, and then with, I want to make a joke, and I will. I mean, they kind of have some special pharmacy delivery, they have some special pills of divine wisdom. When they take those pills, they know how to apply it for today. On the basis of what was word teaching, how it was applied before, now how can we apply it today? So most of these guys, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel is in exile, but still, he goes to the nobility of either kings or in exile, to nobility of the people, and says, guys, that's what you need to do. That's how you should act now. For example, Ezekiel in exile very often comes to nobility, and I mean, those guys were dragged even before Jerusalem fell, and half of his prophecies are like, should you unpack your bags or keep them packed, because very soon you will go back. And he constantly repeats, guys, you will be here for a long time. He doesn't give a specific date. 70 years we have from Jeremiah, but that's what he goes to. You do not need to wait that the glory of the Lord will defend temple, will defend Jerusalem. It will fall down because God is really angry with whatever goes on there, and he gives them the reasons why God is very angry. He's not just a capricious God who just doesn't like some things and likes some other things, and tomorrow he changes his mind, but there are particular reasons. So right now, in exile, unpack your bags, settle, build houses, get jobs, get into society, and so on and so forth. So when we look on Isaiah, it is mostly prophecies concerning what was going on in Judea at this time. Little bit, he also looks a little bit into the future, but the middle part, very interesting. From 36 to 39 is a historical insertion. Not in the sense that there was an editor who inserted later on, nobody knows when, and nobody knows by whom, but what I mean is, in the whole book of prophecies, we have a historical block. It talks about the life of King Hezekiah, good guy, more or less. I mean, all of them are more or less good guys. Okay? So then we go back, and we have chapters 40 to 48. We again have oracles about future of Judah, kind of a response to the judgments that we have heard here. Then we have 49 to 55, or sometimes scholars debate to 54. Okay, let them debate. I'm not going to argue about that. That's the stuff. And the very end is basically our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The seventh part, A prime, goes from 56 to 66. That's our seventh, therefore, sabbatical theme. We have many joyful songs here. We have a peace here. We have restoration here. That's where we have a passage that Jesus uses that we have in the Gospel of Luke. Remember, I came to heal the sick, to cure that the lame can walk, and so on and so forth. That when he was given the scroll of Isaiah, okay, in the synagogue, he opens up and it's 61, the chapter 61, that's what he reads from. So that's how Isaiah is structured, and we are in this block, and this block surprisingly has 7 parts. So that's A, so let's have minor A. Chapter 1, B is 2 to 4, C is 5, D is 6, okay? And C prime would be 7 to 8, I think 18, give me a second, I will check myself. 17, yes, no, 18, I'm sorry, 8, 18, and then B prime would be 8, 19 to 11, 9, and then A prime would be 11, 10 to the end of chapter 12. Okay? So, and we can block this one, we can see that this is a separate block by that repeating phrase, in that day. Okay? So, and it's kind of interesting to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 again. Not surprising that chapter 6 that we discussed like a couple of months ago, as I said, is in the middle. If we correlate these guys to 7 days of creation, makes perfect sense, that's where we have holy, 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 kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. About the God, because God, even in case of death, King Uzziah, we still have the one who rules and shine and everything is glorious. Okay? Chapter 5, if you'll go to chapter 5, that's where the speech about vineyard is. Okay? What was created in day 3? So it's third block in our, third sub-block in our block. Okay? What was created in day 3? Trees and grass. Okay? The greens. Everything that grows out of the land. So no wonder we have speech about vineyard here, not somewhere else. Okay? So when we see this kind of stuff, and when we will come to our passage, we have few sabbatical themes here. Okay? For example, like rest, joy, songs, Sabbath in our biblical paradigm, that's the day of worship. That's the day when you gather regularly into synagogue, the house of prayer. Some people who lived in Jerusalem into the temple and so on and so forth. So that's what we have here. Okay, so now with this in mind, let us go into the text itself. Very interesting. So first of all, we need to talk about the phrase, that day. Okay, what's the day? In that day, so you will say, in that day, blah, blah, blah. What's the day? Depending on the commentary that you see or read, there are 2 main things that usually are discussed. One of them is the day of global judgment, okay? And as a part of global judgment, there will be a small remnant of those who will be saved. Another one is the day of global salvation, okay? So however you see that day is really like far, far away, okay? As most of the time, I have a different opinion, and I will definitely share it with you, but it doesn't mean, okay, it's just my opinion, so take it as for whatever it works. I think the day, in Hebrew it would be ha-yom, okay? It's, and especially if we know that we are in the 7th block, It's the day of Lord's visitation. Okay, so in 6 days earth was created, and then Lord appeared to Adam and Eve, and they had some kind of, not the conversation that they should have had. They ended up with different conversation by the tree. So that's, the Lord will appear. Okay, so in a sense, the Lord will judge. But we need to also know, I think we've talked about that, I would just remind you one more time, that the Lord's judgment, or any judgment in the Bible, is not necessarily a negative one. Okay? If we go to the story of creation, Lord says, this is good. Okay? That's a judgment. Means you passing the judgment and giving your opinion, authoritative opinion about something. And this is judged good. Something is judged bad. Okay? So when Lord will appear in that day, you will go through the process of judgment. In a sense, we have, it's kind of like a cake with at least 3 levels. Okay? Kind of like the one my wife did. Not exactly like that, but yeah. The first level, the very obvious level for basically all the Israelites who would be there and who would hear those words in that day, and what was going on is they would think about the 7th day in the week. Okay? It's the first liturgical association they will have. Because you come to a place of worship and somehow you are judged. Think of our worship service. What do we start our worship service with? First, we kind of reminded that we are in the presence of the Lord. And the pastor says, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay, we are. What's going on then? And then, because we are, after the whole week of what we've been doing during this whole week, what are we doing? We are judged. We confess our sins. Okay, that's the very first thing. You know, so that's what we start with, because if we would not drop our problems and our bad baggage from the last week, we would not be able to proceed further to receive the word and receive the sacraments. Okay, so that's the first one. Second one is also liturgical association, but a little bit on a bigger scale. In the year, in the calendar, Israelite calendar, in the biblical calendar, let's put it this way, in the biblical calendar, in the year circle, there was, this is Passover, kind of like April-ish thing. And in the fall, mostly in September, we have a new year. And then 10 days after New Year, you have, it's called Yom Kippur, or usually it is translated as Day of Atonement, which is not an ideal translation. It's actually a day of covering. Okay? Because you would cover the first priests and then nation of Israel would be covered with the sacrificial blood. Okay? So that's the day of judgment for the whole nation, once a year. By the way, it's very interesting. If you really study that, if you really want to study that, sometime later, just go to Leviticus chapter 23. The whole chapter is about calendar. I mean, it's like you celebrate this. When you count everything, you have in a year one fast day and about 85 feast days. Okay? That's the biblical calendar. Much more joy than fast. It is needed in life, but the structure would be different. So it's kind of like an interesting hint when you read remember this wonderful parable that Jesus tells about Pharisee and tax collector who came into the temple. And the Pharisee says, I'm such a good guy. I fast Wednesdays and Fridays, I don't know. Maybe it's good for health reasons, but not in the Bible. 1 day a year. Okay? Kind of cool. I like it. So that would be the second kind of level of the cake. Second layer of the cake. Okay? This Yom Kippur, this day of covering, day of atonement, that the whole nation would be hopefully properly judged, sacrifice would be offered, and they can live the whole year with renewed relationship with the Lord. Okay, it does not mean that if you personally sinned during the year, you can still go back to the temple and do your own thing. But as a nation, they had 1 day in a year. Okay. Then, of course, there is a last and the global one. Okay, so that would be the third level. And so far, as far as we are here, I guess it didn't really come yet. But that's different story. When we will let us go to our passage, there is one more very interesting feature, how that chapter kind of develops through the verses. Unfortunately, in English, we cannot see that development because with the years of our present situation in school education, we lost few linguistic features. You in English is both singular and plural. Okay? When you say you really need to know the context. Is that you or you as you, okay, as many people. So we used to have, the as is you singular and you as plural, not anymore. So what I'm going to is, I should have probably erased it, but let's stay with that. In 12:1, you is singular. Okay? In 12:4, you is plural. So, the first stanza, it says, you will say in that day. You means you personally. Is that, then the question is, who is this you? Okay, is that the leader of congregation who starts the song and then everybody follows? Or is just any regular person will say in this day by himself. So it's kind of like a personal confession of joy, not necessarily confession of sins. Okay? Interestingly enough, if we'll look in our worship folders, have you ever noticed that when we confess our creed of our common Christian faith, it says, we never say we believe in God the Father Almighty and so on and so forth. We say I believe. Even though we say it together, but it's every one of us say that. You confess from you personally. Okay? So that's kind of would be a parallel to this passage. I will give thanks. So you, each one of us will say, I will give thanks to the Lord. And then in 4, it is you, plural, again. And it is very interesting to see that the previous passage ends up when they came up from the land of Egypt. Okay? And a little bit further in verse 2, we have a parallel verse with Exodus 15. Let us jump for a second into Exodus 15. Exodus 15 is a great song of praise that Israelites sung after they crossed so-called Red Sea. Okay? And the thing is, for some reason, when they recorded it, check verse 1. Bless you. Then Moses and the people of Israel sang this song to the Lord, saying, and so on and so forth. Okay? So we have Moses as a leader, as one guy, and then we have multitude, basically, we read later on how many people left. It's roughly 600,000 men, plus their wives, plus their kids, plus there was unnumbered, it's called multitude of, mixed multitude, basically, the multitude of people from other nations or races who left with them. But it is structured again, Moses and the whole people, okay? So, and then they sing the song, and the scholars debate how would they sing the song. They didn't know the words. Was it Moses will say one line and then everybody would repeat? There are lots of interesting theories, but we're not going to go there. I just wanted to show you that this is like a very interesting Exodus parallel. Not only in words, we'll come to that point, but also in the structure of the passage itself. Okay? So, if we'll jump back to Isaiah. So, what will you say in that day? I will give thanks to you, O Lord, for though you were angry with me, your anger turned away, and that you might comfort me. Okay? So, if we would go back to the structure of our passage, we would see that most, like at least first half of this block is filled with representation of what we would say Lord's anger. Lord is disappointed with Israel. Even that chapter 5 with vineyard. I took care of you. I dug the trench. I put the manure. I had the tower built. So you would be taken care of as a vineyard. But when I came for grapes, there were wild grapes, not the good ones. So you cannot really process wild grapes. You can, but it's not as tasty, definitely. So what we see here, at the end of the first block, we see how God, or we see the prophet telling us that the mood will be changed. So Lord is not gonna be forever angry. His anger will be changed into comfort. And even further, it's even more comforting words, I would say. Verse 2, behold, God is my salvation. So, I will trust and I will not be afraid. And then there is a quote from Exodus. For the Lord God is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. If we'll go back to Exodus 15 in verse 2, that's the quote from this song. So again, Judah is reminded by prophet Isaiah that our salvation has been done for us in the past. In the story of Exodus, in the story of Passover. Now we are going through another crisis, but since God is faithful, we can trust that He will help us to go through this, and we will be able to sing this song. Because it's not because of us, it's because of Him. Okay? It's not because we turned away from our bad stuff. Actually, the thing is, you turned away from your anger that you might comfort me, because you are salvation. You are the reason for my strength and my song. And again, and repeated word salvation. Interestingly, the verb to save in Hebrew sounds like Yeshua. And there is a hey at the very end. Sounds almost identical as the name of Jesus in Hebrew. Basically identical. So, I mean, I know it's going to be a play on words, but kind of like a maybe weird Hebrew language pun. But behold, the God is my salvation, and I will trust, and so I will trust, and I will not be afraid. For the Lord God is my strength and my song, and He became my salvation as Jesus. So He is my salvation as Jesus. He is my salvation as Jesus. So repeat it twice. Therefore, with joy you will draw waters from wells of salvation. Okay? So that idea of salvation is repeated twice on like 3 different levels. First, salvation correlates to trust, kind of like inner feelings. The second one, when you have this inner, stability, emotional stability, theological stability, mind stability, you go to the second level and you go in the songs of praise. Okay, so He became my strength and my song. And the third one is salvation correlated to the wells. Okay, interesting. So, what do we have? What is the importance of wells? Yeah, it's water. It's so obvious. Especially if we think of Israel. Well, it's not necessarily Israel. I mean, even here. I mean, before we had pipes, you need to have some kind of source of water. Unless you live by the river or lake, not even an ocean, because it's salty. You need to have some kind of stable source of fresh water for drinking, for cooking, for washing, for, washing your clothing. I mean, anything. Apart from breathing, probably the next need is water. I mean, I don't know. Even the food is important. And the clothing is important. But you live less without water than without the food. I mean, you can go forward on just on water much further than if without the food, than if you would have a food but would have no water. Okay, so scientifically, as far as my limited knowledge of biology is, we are made of 70-80% of water, something like this. But there is one more important thing. Those wells or springs of water, you can also translate it as this. So they kind of go from underground, and they are, in some sense, pressurized. So with the pressure, it goes out. We have few instances in the Bible where it's very pictorial and very important. Remember, Abraham sends his servant to find wife for his son Isaac. Servant goes to very unknown land. He comes to a place and he finds wife for Isaac. Where? At the well. He meets Rebekah at the well first. Then their son, Jacob, for some family misunderstanding, had to run away. And he goes to another land, and he meets his future wife, and immediately falls in love with her, but that meeting happened where? At the well. Okay? Then Moses had to run away from Pharaoh, and he goes to unknown land, and he comes to the place and meets his future wife and falls in love with her almost immediately, but he first time meets her where? At the well. Okay? Where Jesus meets with the Samaritan woman? At the well. There is one more interesting story. So it gives you a physical sense of salvation which is projected into the future. Because theoretically, when man and a woman meet together, they might form a family and there will be children, and therefore there will be a future. Okay, in that sense. There is one more important story that I would like to mention in connection with that, which is not as obvious in parallel and in the wording. But if we would go back to Gospel of John, chapter 2. Oops. The very first story is a story of Cana of Galilee. Jesus was invited, and his mother was invited to wedding. Okay? What happened during that wedding? Remember? They had problem. They ran out of wine. Okay? So what happened after that? Because of miraculous and very gracious intervention of Jesus, the sources of water, 6 big stone jars, turned into 6 stones jars. Still were 6 stone jars, but the water in them turned into wine. Okay? And in a sense, that guy who got married that day even didn't know how wonderfully he was saved. Not only in the wedding, but in the many years in the future. They would get married, they would have kids, and if they would really run out of wine, what might happen is he would be pretty embarrassed, because it was his poor planning that he didn't prepare enough wine for the wedding. Okay? So their kids would be grown, and as all the kids would run on the road, scratch their knee. Oh yeah, of course he was scratching their knee. That's from the family where guy could not prepare the wine. And so on and so forth. It would carry on and on and on. So Jesus, by providing that well, spring of water that turned into wine, he saved him socially. That's very important. And I think it's really interesting to see how we go from our inner assurance of relationship with the Lord. It goes into our song. That salvation kind of produces the song. And the third one is we either dig the well for somebody to provide them water, or we share what we have with others. Okay? So that's kind of like a 3-level pattern that we can see here. Okay, now verse 4 and further. So, verse 4. In that day you will say, again, one more time I would mention that, you in this particular case is plural. So you as congregation. So first it's everybody's confession, personal confession, and then now we sing as one congregation, one group. So what do we say? The words are, again, similar, but not identical. Give thanks to the Lord, call upon his name. Make known his deeds among the people, proclaim that his name is exalted. Okay, so immediately we identify as a group in relation to other groups of people. Okay? Other nations. We do not see it, again, as clearly, because we say, peoples is... Yesterday we watched an interesting, I like Anger Management. Very cool movie. And almost in the very beginning, the guy sits in the plane, and then security guy in the plane comes. There was a misunderstanding. There was a kind of conversation with the voices were raising up and up and up, and then so security guy comes, and the main hero says, "Oh, what happened with you? What's up with you people?" And what happened is the security guy was Afro-American. Said, "You people, I'm not going to tolerate racist stuff here." So sometimes we do not see that word "people" in the sense of racist. But in this particular case, It's not just groups of people. It's different nationalities, different nations. Okay, so it's a witness of Israel or Judah, those who believe in God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to other nations. So how do we witness to them, or how should they witness to them? Is we proclaim His deeds among people and His name. So it's two things, what we know about Him and what He has done to us. It's a very interesting thing that we can really use in our daily life of how do we witness. Basically, what we can say is not what we read. We can talk about that, but mostly what we are talking about is when we share our faith, what we can share is what we know and what He has done to us. That's how He appeared in my life or in the life of our congregation. In verse 5, sing praises to the Lord, for He has done gloriously. Okay? Let this be made known to all the earth. Okay? So again, this second part mostly concentrates on what is what we might call is an outward witness or outward appearance to others. Okay, we share with them what He has done. Let it be known to all people or all the earth. Now that's an interesting shift. Verse 6. Shout and sing for joy, or inhabitant of Zion. And this inhabitant is actually a feminine word. Okay, so we go from singular masculine into plural masculine, and we end with the women's choir. Okay, so for great is in your midst the Holy One of Israel. And we talked about Holy One of Israel a little bit when we talked about chapter 6, so I'm not really gonna repeat myself. So just one more reminding is the holy is in Hebrew is kadosh, it means separate. So he's not like other gods, basically. And in verse 6, what happens is because we have this shift of masculine / feminine, we might see Him as a bridegroom that comes to his bride. And bride is very joyful or rejoicing, and she's happy to see Him and acknowledge all His wonderful, faithful, salvatory gifts for her. Any questions or comments?